Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Comrade Matt Freeman of the Western Fourth Proletarian Revolutionary Counter-Revolutionary Reactionary Union, and this is Comrade Scott Daly.
Long live the spirit of revolution. Hello,
That's right.
everybody, and welcome. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Friday night. I hope you're not all seeing Avengers Endgame because I can't, and therefore no one else is allowed to until I have seen it. If you are here joining us for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media. We make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also arrange and organize this monthly book club. Matt, explain what this thing is.
Well, usually each month, Scott and I select five
everybody.
books chosen from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community, and then we put up a poll for all of the supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia, and we let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. And then the book with the most votes wins, and we talk about it. We all read it together, except every 6 months, me and Scott take turns picking the book that we're going to read ourselves, and that was what this month was. So this month it was my pick, and I chose the book.
Yeah, that's right. And then on the last Friday of every month, we meet here, right here on our YouTube channel to chat about the book that was chosen. We'll pull slides from important or interesting moments in the story, and then we'll take a deep dive into the book for a couple hours. If you're in the chat right now, say hello. Feel free to talk to us, give your opinions. We want this to be an interactive discussion. That's why we're doing it live instead of just recording a podcast like we normally do. We like these things to be interactive. So if you're here, say hi, chat, ask questions, give your opinions. We want to hear it all.
Yeah, we will be reacting in real time. So.
We absolutely will. If there's anyone here, I don't think they're listening to my "You're not allowed to go see Avengers Endgame," Matt. I don't think they're listening.
Yeah. This is going to be a busy weekend for entertainment.
I know. All right, Matt, while we wait for people to say hello, why don't you talk to us a little bit about this month's book?
Well, this month I chose The Three-Body Problem by Kixin Liu, I think. I don't know.
Can we say at the top?
Yes.
Apologies to the entire nation of China for
yes,
all the terrible pronunciations we're going to be doing throughout this entire podcast, because there's no way we're going to get any of these names right. We're going to try our best. It's going to be bad.
Yeah. I've been told that my pronunciation is terrible and I'm completely unable to do tones. So I'm not going to try. Or I'm going to sort of try. So I listened to the audiobook.
Oh,
so
then you cheated.
Well,
I expect you to be perfect. I have an excuse.
But I don't think the audiobook will even be able to save me. So the summary for this book is as follows from Amazon.com, because Goodreads let us down this time.
Goodreads.
I know. Summary goes: set against the backdrop of China's Cultural Revolution, a secret military project sends signals into space to establish contact with aliens. An alien civilization on the brink of destruction captures the signal and plans to invade Earth. Meanwhile, on Earth, different camps start forming, planning to either welcome the superior beings and help them take over a world seen as corrupt, or to fight against the invasion. The result is a science fiction masterpiece of enormous scope and vision. Scott, what do you feel about that summary?
I don't like it.
I don't like it either.
Don't like it.
They sucked away everything that was interesting about the story.
It would be kind of like a detective novel putting who murdered the person
in the summary. Yes.
This book treats what's going on here, what is killing these scientists, what is the enemy. It treats all this stuff throughout 3/4 of the book as a mystery that our main character is trying to solve. And they just kind of, I understand they're trying to sell the book. I get it. But I think, it really does take something away from it. It really does. The fact that I went into this book knowing that it had to do with aliens, I think hurt my enjoyment of it a little bit.
I think I somehow managed to not know that.
Oh, really? Well, good for you.
Yeah, I had really didn't know what this book was about, which was nice. I'm coming to actually enjoy that.
Good.
We got some people showing up in the chat now. Hello, 567, Flavored Owl, Mary, and Daniel. Nice to see everyone.
Yeah, welcome, guys. As we give our overall impressions of the book, we want you guys to give yours. So had you read this book before the book club? Did you read it just for the book club? Did you reread it? And what did you think of the book?
Flavored Owl says that they didn't read the summary, so they were also unaware. 567 says they kept wondering when the aliens were going to show up. So I guess they did know about it.
Yeah. I wish I usually don't read book summaries. Usually, I do for these books because I'm copy pasting them into a web page. So I feel like I have to read it before I put it in there. I feel like if I'm going to publish something on our website, I need to at least read the thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like I just went to the audiobook website and clicked download, and then I never looked at like the book, the book jacket or whatever.
So then I'm curious, as we get into what your overall thoughts on the book are. You picked this. This was not democratically decided. This was your decision as supreme ruler of the book club. What, if you didn't know anything about it, what made you pick it?
Purely on the strength of recommendations from people whose opinions that I trust and who I know like the same things that I like, and someone liked it enough to give it to me as a gift, actually, and to me that's like one of the stronger forms of recommendation, that I have it on my shelf because somebody gave it to me. So I'm like, well, yeah, should probably get around to reading this one.
Yeah. So what'd you think of it?
I liked it a lot. It was very strange. So yeah, we should talk, I guess, up front about, and I guess we'll find opportunity to talk about it as we go, but talk about the fact that this is a novel that was written in Chinese for a Chinese audience. The themes and the content is very much oriented around that. And so I was really interested to read this, partially because I'm like, I don't think I've ever read a novel that was originally written in Chinese. And so I wonder how it's going to be different. And having read it, I find that I can't answer that question because I would need to read like 5 novels in Chinese to actually be like, okay, this is what Chinese novels are like, and then this is just how this novel is different, doing its own thing. But yeah, I enjoyed a lot about it. I thought the science fiction elements were awesome. Like you mentioned a minute ago, the fact that it was all sort of wrapped up as a mystery, I thought was maybe my favorite part about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I told you about halfway through reading this book that this is the most Matt book I've ever read, because this is very much your type of deal, right? Like some of the other science fiction books you read, like Blindsight, this is a book about complex, grand ideas about science, about existence, about humanity, like very complex, big ideas.
Almost to the point of being silly.
Almost, yeah.
In a good way that I enjoyed.
That is interesting, and I think the tone of the novel is something we're going to be talking about a lot as we go through our slides, because there are pretty ridiculous moments in this story that come off almost farcical a little bit. Yeah. But I think it's all part of a grand design, and it's difficult to tell. Like I think this is the only Chinese book I've read, so it's difficult to tell if that's a cultural thing or if it's just this book in particular. I think that's going to be my challenge throughout this conversation: is this specific to this book, or is this reflective of a culture I unfortunately do not know a lot about? Yeah.
Maybe someone in the chat happens to know more about Chinese literature than us, but we'll just have to make do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but overall, I liked the book. I was thinking about it, and I feel similar to the way I felt about Foundation, the Asimov book, in that this is a story that's very focused on the science fiction, the emphasis on the science. It is very focused on these big ideas, these complex thoughts, and it is less focused on deep, multifaceted characters. I think there are some fairly good characters in the story, but only a couple of them, and everyone else is just kind of there and flat. And like I had difficulties in this book, and it's not just because they're names I'm not used to, but I had difficulties remembering who was who, because I think a lot of the characters were so uninteresting outside of our main couple. So I kept going back. At the front of the book, there's like a cast list, and I kept having to go back to the cast list at the front to refresh my memory of, okay, this one was this person, and they're this person's husband. Okay, I got it. I felt like I had to do that multiple times, and that's just because I don't think many of the characters outside of Wang really left an imprint on me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wang and Ye are the two that I would point out as being, they're the main characters, and they're pretty well drawn. and I think maybe there's one or two side characters who left enough of an impression for me to even remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree.
The cop is obviously the greatest character in the world.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to be harder on Foundation in that regard than I am on this book, because at least the main characters had personalities and like interests.
Did they though?
He was a photographer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true.
She had that stint in that village. It wasn't all just like utilitarian. Let's get through the plot, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean, but I think we'll probably get into it. I think his photography is actually very important to the plot, though.
Yeah,
and not just literally. I think metaphorically. Yeah, but yeah. I really like this book. I was very surprised how critical this book was of Chinese communism.
Yeah,
I think maybe that's just a false perception I have, but I had this idea that the state was much more, ready to knock down and censor things that are speaking ill against the government, and maybe it did it in a subversive enough way that it's specifically talking about the government at the time of the Cultural Revolution and not the government as of right now. So that was okay, but I was very surprised about that.
Yeah, I was somewhat surprised as well. I mean, I guess you can only assume that like the book is obviously criticizing like the excesses of the revolution.
Yeah,
and it doesn't really criticize communism. It criticizes the revolution of that time period, which had its own kind of like moral panic texture that is almost distinct from communism as an ideology.
Yeah, but I think there are also criticisms of the lack of individualism. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not a direct criticism, but like the alien race has lost all sense of individualism, and that to one of the character who decides to try to stop the invasion is convinced that that's the reason for their societal decline.
Yeah. The Trisolarans are definitely like a caricature of a communist world, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, let's get into the slides, because that's basically what we're going to start out talking about anyway.
All right, let's do it.
So first slide. These are the first paragraphs of the story, where we introduce many of the themes and the background ideas. The Red Union had been attacking the headquarters of the April 28th Brigade for 2 days. Their red flags fluttered restlessly around the brigade building like flames yearning for firewood. The Red Union commander was anxious, though not because of the defenders he faced. The more than 200 Red Guards of the April 28th Brigade were mere greenhorns compared with the veteran Red Guards of the Red Union, which was formed at the start of the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution in early 1966. The Red Union had been tempered by the tumultuous experience of revolutionary tours around the country and seeing Chairman Mao in the great rallies in Tiananmen Square. But the commander was afraid of the dozen or so iron stoves inside the building, filled with explosives and connected to each other by electric detonators. He couldn't see them, but he could feel their presence like iron sensing the pull of a nearby magnet. If a defender flipped a switch, revolutionaries and counter-revolutionaries alike would all die in one giant ball of fire. And the young Red Guards of the April 28th Brigade were indeed capable of such madness. Compared with the weathered men and women of the first generation of Red Guards, the new rebels were a pack of wolves on hot coals, crazier than crazy. So I love it how so many of the books we read start out by telling you all of their themes.
Yeah,
but in a way where it may not be obvious. In this case, it certainly wasn't. Like I was just like, okay, we're in the communist revolution in China, but there's a lot more to it than that. You've got the element of willingness to destruct oneself in order to accomplish a goal.
Yep.
Which is a huge theme of the story. You've got general craziness under the influence of an ideology, which is another massive theme. You've got the idea of like revolutionaries and then like other people who are more revolutionary, and the first group isn't revolutionary enough for their tastes, which is something that's going to show up a couple times. And of course, you've got like just different groups of people who are willing to kill each other over like nothing.
Yeah, I like that. Like there's these two sides are so, I feel like, almost so indistinguishable, and I actually think that that's one of the ways in which not having like a super in-depth knowledge and awareness of the history at the time of the Cultural Revolution allowed me to appreciate this in this book more, because it's like you're not sure who's on what side here. Like it's this is all very confusing, and like you got the Red Guard and the Red Union and the April 28th Brigade, and then there like clearly there are Red Guards on both sides of this conflict. And so it's like, wait, who's attacking who, and what is it about? Like, it's almost intentionally confusing to a point where, like, I think it gets across the message that the difference between these people is actually probably pretty minute and not necessarily that important. And I think maybe knowing that history a little more would have not let me get to that. But I thought that like it was a roundabout way of me kind of picking up on these themes very early in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just really interesting because this author clearly has a lot to say about what human beings do to each other and the kinds of groups that they form, and what they do when you push them too hard.
Right.
Which I think brings us to our next slide.
Yeah, perfect transition. God does not exist. All religions are tools concocted by the ruling class to paralyze the spirit of the people. That is a very one-sided view. Is it yay?
Yeah, I think yay.
Yay, yeah. Yay said calmly. The young Red Guard, embarrassed and angry, reached the conclusion that, against this dangerous enemy, all talk was useless. She picked up her belt and rushed at Ye, and her 3 companions followed. Ye was tall, and the 4 14-year-olds had to swing their belts upward to reach his head, still held high. After a few strikes, the tall iron hat, which had protected him a little, fell off. The continuing barrage of strikes by the metal buckles finally made him fall down. The young Red Guards, encouraged by their success, became even more devoted to this glorious struggle. They were fighting for faith, for ideals. They were intoxicated by the bright light cast on them by history, proud of their own bravery. Ye's 2 students finally had enough. The chairman instructed us to rely on eloquence rather than violence. They rushed over and pulled the 4 semi-crazed girls off Ye. But it was already too late. The physicist lay quietly on the ground, his eyes still open as blood oozed from his head. The frenzied crowd sank into silence. The only thing that moved was a thin stream of blood, like a red snake. It slowly meandered across the stage, reaching the edge and dripping onto a chest below. The rhythmic sound made by the blood drops was like the steps of someone walking away. A cackling laugh broke the silence. The sound came from Shaolin, whose mind had finally broken. The laughter frightened the attendees, who began to leave the struggle session, first in trickles, then in a flood. The exercise ground soon emptied, leaving only one young woman below the stage. She was Ye Wenji, Ye Zatai's daughter. I probably fucked that pronunciation up, but it's okay.
Yeah, so we move on. We're more of this communist revolution imagery. We're well in the past. And we're at one of these struggle sessions where this physicist, this intellectual, is being beaten to death for basically just refusing to toe the party line. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of this, we're introduced. Ye Wenjie is not even like mentioned until this moment where it's like her dad has just been killed and she's watched it, and this is kind of the pivotal moment of her life, I think, because she's from this point on, basically, she's reacting to this event, I feel.
Yeah, and I think that's really great because a lot of what this story is about is cycles, right? Is the cyclical nature of things. How we kind of do the same thing over and over again, and it only leads to more death and more destruction, because Ye here is motivated by this moment to basically build her own revolutionary force that does the same thing to other people, and it's just over and over again. And of course, when we meet the alien group, we see that their whole existence is literally defined by their cycles.
Yeah.
And I kind of like I know the struggle session is a very specific, it was a very specific like public shaming thing, but I liked the comparison between, maybe it's just the wording, like the idea of struggle session as compared to the chaotic season in the 3-body, like just like that we go through like the language seems very familiar. Like we go through these stable sessions and then we go through these chaotic seasons, and how that relates to the uprising, the struggle sessions versus the normal sessions of existence. So even though it's made literal through the game and through the aliens, like it's the same thing here. We go through these periods of calm and these periods of turmoil, and it ends up really hurting society
Yeah.
and everything. And we just go through these cycles over and over again.
I think that may be like the most crucial theme of the book, and I don't want to blow the quote because it's like several slides from now actually, but there's basically a moment in the story where Wang is like, wait a minute, if we can't even solve the three body problem, which is actually an extremely simple problem, then how can we solve any of our problems?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're talking about, right? Like this idea that everyone freaks out, blames intellectuals for things for some reason,
Yeah.
has moral panics, decides that like no one else is being revolutionary enough for their tastes, and just tears themselves apart. And it's like there was never like that was never going to work. That was never the solution. You know,
Right.
whatever the thing of the day is, communism was never going to be the answer. Just like Trisolaran Adventism was never going to be the answer.
Right. And this idea that if this thing has not solved our problem yet, we must give it up, we must destroy it, and we must do something else. And that's literally what Ye does here, because from this moment on, her basic decision is that like human beings no longer have the capability of solving our own problems. The only thing that can solve our problems is an outside force coming in to force that change. And that's like a very pessimistic view of humanity, which has thus far accomplished amazing things. Now I know we got some issues, but that's the kind of like throw up your hands and give up on it attitude that I think actually makes Ye secretly, like maybe not so secretly, not so subtly, like a horrible person.
Yeah, no, she's evil. She's evil, and she's the villain. And it's and I say that despite the fact that she goes through tremendous suffering in the story, but
Sure.
like if a school shooter goes through tremendous suffering, you don't give them a pass. They still, you know, did something unforgivable.
Right.
And that's basically what she is. She's someone who's like, I'm going to tap out of this system because it just made me so mad, and I'm just going to kill everybody and bring them down with me.
Yeah. And of course we learn later that her whole organization has two separate groups, the Adventists and the I forgot the other one. It starts with an R.
Yeah, I forgot it too. It's in the slides
We'll
later.
get there. We'll get there. Let's just move on.
Yeah, let's move on. And
567 says I got Wen right in the name
that's
pronunciation, so I got half of one name right.
Yeah,
I'm doing awesome.
Yeah, I don't think I did.
You didn't get Wen? I think you could handle Wen.
So the story has a couple of plot of main characters. Basically, we've got Ye and then we've got Wang, and so we're basically meeting Wang. He's a scientist. And he's sort of press ganged into being part of this like secret international military council to help with this mysterious threat that is going to be the mystery of the book actually.
Yeah. And we jump forced into present day, right?
That's right. We in fact the future, I guess.
Yeah. I guess you're right. Yeah.
And he's been brought in by the sharp-eyed Shi. They're also comrades. Anyway, that's how everyone addresses each other here. Shi whispered to Wang, pointing at the four foreigners with his cigarette. While he was baffled by how Shi knew what he was thinking, Wang was impressed with his powers of observation. Da Shi, put out your cigarette. That's enough. There's enough smoke in here, General Chang said as he flipped through some documents. He called Shi Chang by his nickname, Big Shi. Shi looked around, but he couldn't find an ashtray. In the end, he dropped the cigarette into a teacup. He raised his hand, and before Chang could even acknowledge him, he spoke loudly. General, I have a request which I've made before. I want information parity. General Chang lifted his head. There's never been a military operation in which there was information parity. I have to apologize to all the scholars, but we cannot give you any more background. We are not the same as the eggheads, Shea said. The police have been part of the Battle Command Center from the start. But even now, we still don't know what this is all about. You continue to push the police out. You learn from us what you need about our techniques, but then you send us away one by one. Several other police officers in attendance whispered to Shea to shut up. And like he's my favorite character, honestly.
Shea, I mean, he has the most personality. Like he's kind of the black sheep of the story because everyone else is an intellectual, everyone else is a scientist of some sort. Now Wang is a very different kind of scientist from Ye and a lot of the other theoretical scientists that we see. But Shea is just a cop, and kind of a dirty cop, kind of an asshole, like not a
Yeah.
great person. But I think that's what's so fascinating is like one of arguably the least moral person from like traditional perspective, least intellectual, least moral. At the end of the book is the one who is not willing to give up, right? The one
Right.
who doesn't want to throw in the towel, doesn't want to give up on humanity, and he doesn't come up with the plan, but he leads the characters towards the plan
Yeah.
that we don't know about because this is the first of a trilogy.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that there's an indication that all of these really smart intellectual people get sucked into these bizarre ways of thinking more easily. Like later we're gonna meet, the Trisolaran Adventists, and like they're all super geniuses, and like that's the problem is that they are susceptible to these like pie in the sky types of thoughts. Whereas Shea, he's just this cop. He's like, I don't have time for this.
Right.
Just let's just catch the bad guys, and I'm gonna go home and smoke a cigarette, and this like is very human, very grounded, and it makes him like the most likable person in the story.
So what do you think? What do you think that's the story's saying via the Shea character, though? Because I mean, you're like this is written by a guy who obviously is very interested in engineering, very interested in science. He loves these concepts. He loves talking about these concepts, but then he puts this character in here, this character who's kind of pivotal to the continuation of the plot. That is none of those things.
I mean, I think he's just like a normal person who's not concerned with all these matters of high philosophy that the other characters tend to be preoccupied with, and that gives him a perspective on like the fact that they're just going crazy, which they're blind to because they're like sucked into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get that.
But yeah, no, I don't. I mean, I don't think the author is an anti-intellectual, but I think that he has a respect for the type of person who doesn't have any interest in intellectualism. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else you want to say? I think it's great that I think it shows how not quality of a character Wang is. That in the slide you pulled to introduce Wang, we talked about Dache mostly.
Yeah, right. He's just way more fun.
Speaking of Wang, at the military council meeting, Wang is given a list and sees on that list a name that he recognizes. In front of this metal monster stood the slim figure of a young woman. The composition's lighting was fantastic as well. The metal monster was buried in the shadow of a temporary construction shelter, further emphasizing its stern, rough quality. But a single ray of light from the western sun coming through the central hole of the shelter fell right on the woman. The soft glow lit up her supple hair and highlighted her white neck above the collar of her overalls, as though a single flower was blooming in the metal ruin after a violent thunderstorm. That night, Wang sat in his study and admired the few landscape photographs of his works that he was most proud of hanging on the wall. His eyes fell on the frontier scene, a desolate valley terminating in a snow-capped mountain. On the nearer end of the valley, half of a dead tree, eroded by the vicissitudes of many years, took up 1/3 of the picture. In his imagination, Wang placed the figure that lingered in his mind at the far end of the valley. Surprisingly, it made the entire scene come alive, as though the world in the photograph recognized that tiny figure and responded to it, as though the whole scene existed for her. He then imagined her figure in each of his other photographs, sometimes pasting her two eyes into the empty sky over the landscapes. Those images also came alive, achieving a beauty that Wang had never imagined. Wang had always thought that his photographs lacked some kind of soul. Now he understood that they were missing her. All the physicists on this list have committed suicide in the last 2 months, General Chang said. So he's clearly in love with this girl that he met at school, and then abruptly learns of her suicide, which is kind of our inciting incident that gets our main character into the story. This is kind of what leads him into this whole mystery.
Yeah. This idea of all these physicists killing themselves for no discernible reason.
Yeah.
And it humanizes it for him because it is this particular woman that like she was like the greatest genius of the generation or whatever, and it was very young and very accomplished, and apparently like you said, he's in love with her and she's killed herself, and So that's one reason I pulled up the slide, is that it's sort of the thing that hooks him into the plot. But also, this is one of the better examples, I think, of just really beautiful prose, uh, which I like to pay attention to, because again, it's a translation. So I don't have no idea what the original language was, but it's a really, cool idea. This guy who's like wistfully looking at his pictures and imagining this woman who he saw in his pictures.
Yeah,
And I like the language of it.
I agree. I think we need to give full credit to Ken Liu, who did the translation here.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how much of a challenge that would be, and
Yeah.
I think he does a lot of very clever things. Like, I think his footnotes, in order to explain some of the cultural Chinese references that the reader, would not have gotten otherwise, was awesome. I really appreciated those. I appreciated getting those little links into stuff that any reader of the original story would have just known, just off the bat. And I do really like the prose here. I do. And I think it's very fitting for a character like Wang, who is this scientist, is this intellectual, but he's an artist as well, right? Like, I think his photography is a very important trait of his, and one of the reasons why he is so different, one of the reasons why the truth of everything doesn't break him in a way it breaks other people, like these scientists that have killed themselves, is because he's different. He sees the world just a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And I think the prose around this descriptions, this beam of light hitting the girl, him like basically stitching her into every one of his photos and seeing that makes the picture beautiful, is different, and I love it.
Yeah, you could also say that it almost like personally offends him that someone has driven her out of the world, and he wants to find out why, and like the fact that the person who it turns out to be just makes it even more kind of a gut punch.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. So after Wang becomes involved in the investigation to figure out why all the scientists are committing suicide, he goes through an ordeal where all the photographs that he takes with his camera show an inexplicable timestamp, which is counting down. And then, his dreams were chaotic, but there was one constant, the ghostly countdown, suspended in midair. Even before he fell asleep, he had known he would dream of it. In his dreams, he attacked the countdown. Crazed, he tore at it, bit it, but every attempt failed to leave a mark. It continued to hang in the middle of his dream, steadily ticking away. Finally, just as the frustration became almost intolerable, he woke up. Opening his eyes, he saw the ceiling, indistinct above him. The city lights outside the window cast a dim glow against it through the curtains. But one thing did follow him from dream to reality, the countdown. It was still hovering before his eyes. The numbers were thin, but very bright with the burning white glow. The doctor gave him a tolerant smile. You know how much the mind can affect vision? Last month we had a patient, a girl, maybe 15, 16. She was in class when she suddenly lost the ability to see, went completely blind. But all the tests showed that there was nothing wrong with her eyes physiologically. Finally, someone from the Department of Psychiatry treated her with psychotherapy for a month. All of a sudden, her vision returned. Wang knew that he was wasting his time here. He got up. All right, let's not talk about my eyes anymore. I have one last question. Do you know of any physical phenomenon that can operate from a distance and make people see visions? The doctor gave this some thought. Yes, I do. A while back, I was part of a medical team for the Shenzhou 19 spacecraft. Some taikonauts engaged in extravehicular activities reported seeing flashes that didn't exist. The astronauts on the International Space Station reported similar experiences. It was because during periods of intense solar activity, high-energy particles struck against the retina, causing them to see flashes. So, I mean, I basically I only included that last bit because that's exactly why.
Yeah, because he's right.
he's exactly right. That's exactly why Wang is seeing the countdown, is because of high energy particles hitting his retina, but not in the way that he assumes.
Right. Yeah. I really like this mystery. I think this is a really good. I was kind of struggling with the book until this point, and the countdown appearing on the film was the first thing that really sucked me into the book a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing. And it's one of the great examples of how this book is clever and how it solves its mysteries, or at least shows the character solving the mysteries, because like getting to see Wang kind of go through a process of isolating what was happening to just him. Like he grabs a digital camera from his neighbor. He makes his kid and his wife take a picture, and he takes the pictures himself and sees that it's only him. It's just him. I just love like the kind of, going down a list, checking boxes, kind of hypothesizing that he does there. It seems it's very, true to what a scientist character would do when presented with a problem like this, but also like mysterious enough to you're like, I really like this. I'm really into this.
I agree completely. I love the whole countdown sequence, and it was the thing where like you put the book down and you're thinking about it even later. You're like, okay, so what is it? Is this a simulation?
Yeah.
Is some like is it mind control? What is the answer going to be? And what's cool is that like there's no way you could predict what it actually is.
You didn't predict that they'd put a supercomputer on a proton?
A proton. No, I did not predict that a supercomputer on a proton was the answer to the mystery.
You just unfold the proton, Matt.
From an alien solar system.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is I knew that it was aliens, right? Because I read the summary. But I didn't I don't know what were the aliens doing? Are the aliens magic? Is that they have some cool technology? Is something else going on here? What does the countdown mean? Like, I think this is one of the moments that the reading the summary did not ruin for me, because I assumed that this was the aliens screwing with them. I didn't know why or how or what any of it meant, and I think that was still enough to suck me into it a little bit.
And there's certain, like, to a certain degree, you can figure things out like contextually. Like you're like, okay, Wang, you're late in getting this, but I get that the countdown is trying to dissuade you from doing what you're doing. They want you to go in and stop your research, and then they'll stop the countdown. And then he does that, and it works. And you're like, okay, why do they want you to stop your research? and it's fine because Wang is always like a little bit behind in terms of solving things usually. But like that's because he thinks he's going crazy, which is the goal. So
right, because I mean, like, it all starts with the fact that he's like basically told that, hey, physics is wrong.
Yeah,
sorry.
Right, and that's its whole fun thing actually. That I don't think I pulled a specific slide for that, but just this idea that the book actually has this wonderful red herring where they're like, oh yeah, physics is, you're never going to be able to solve it. It's pointless. So all these physicists have wasted their lives. That's why they're killing themselves. And that's like, for a big chunk of the book, you actually think that that's like what this story is going to be about. Like, physics itself is unpredictable. And in fact, I was actually quite wrong. Like I thought like, oh, okay, 3-body problem, the game that we're going to get to in a minute, is like teaching the lesson that the laws of physics themselves are chaotic in the same way that the 3-body problem is chaotic, and it's a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true, actually. The laws of physics are actually there. It's the 3-body thing means something different. But it's interesting that the story kind of misleads you so far.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to get you in the mind of the character too, I think.
Yeah.
567 says in the chat, Wang never treats his wife very well throughout the novel.
Yeah,
which is very true. His wife and his kid is basically a non-factor. I kind of honestly, until I remembered that he used his wife and his kid for the experiment with the phone, I forgot that they existed. So that shows he's not interested in them at all, for sure.
Right, he's like pining for Ye's daughter this whole time.
Yeah, I think you wanted to use this slide to talk about the nanotech, right?
So I didn't pull the slide for the scene where they slice the ship in half with the nanotech, but just this idea that he's actually more of like a practical researcher, and he makes nanofilaments, which are like super strong, super thin, and later in the story they use them like to unexpectedly catch the bad guys on their tanker ship and slice their tanker ship apart.
It's horrifying. Like, I mean, this is the moment where you like realize that there are no right sides in this whole thing, because the book has by this point like pretty firmly established that the organization is pro the non-existence of humanity, right? Like that's their ultimate goal. They're going to get the aliens here. The aliens are going to wipe us all out, and Trisolaran society is going to be reborn on Earth. But then the people against them are just super willing to just wipe out all these people, including innocent people that were going to be on board, that they just said, well, they would have to be sacrificed for the cause. And it's just like how willing people are to sacrifice people to stop behavior and beliefs that go against the ones that
Yeah.
they have.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I like the bit where they decide that they're going to use this plan, and Wang is immediately like paralyzed by the horror of like
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of realizing what that entails.
He's horrified, and
Yeah.
he has trouble watching.
Yeah.
The general is like trying to talk him through it as it's happening
Yeah,
because he realizes how horrifying it is to watch. Yeah, it is like it's insanely cool though. Like
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
I'm sad for all these fictional people that died, but like as the idea was unfolding and constructing itself, I was like, wait a minute, they're
Yeah.
gonna, holy shit, that's
Like a
amazing.
slice. Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of moments in this story where it's clear that he just had this awesome science fiction like scene or idea that he wanted to convey,
Yeah,
and he just manages to fit it in there.
yeah. I think that's a good transition. Are we gonna? Because we're talking about Three Body next, right?
Yeah,
Because that's, I think, my favorite part of the game, or the
Yeah.
book is the game.
yeah,
So after Wang, Wang is led by his investigation to play a virtual reality game called Three Body, which ends up being the most fun and one of the most fun and interesting parts of the book, as we try to solve the mystery posed by the game along with Wang. A follower stripped off his sweat-soaked robe and lay down nude in the muddy earth. In the last glow from the sun already below the horizon, Wang saw water oozing out of follower's body. He knew that it was no longer sweat. All the water in his body was being discharged and squeezed out. The water coalesced into a few small rivulets in the mud. His body turned soft and lost its shape like a melting candle. 10 minutes later, all the water had been eliminated from his body. Follower was now a man-shaped piece of leather, stretched out onto the ground. His facial features had become flattened and indistinct. Is he dead? Wang asked. He remembered seeing such man-shaped pieces of hide scattered along the road. Some were torn and incomplete. He supposed they were the dehydrated bodies follower spoke of earlier as potential kindling. No, King Wen answered. He picked up follower's skin, brushed the mud and dust off, laid him out on a rock, and rolled him up like a balloon with its air let out. He'll recover soon enough when we soak him in water. It's just like soaking dried mushrooms. How long does a stable era last? Wang asked. As short as a day, or as long as a century. No one can predict how long one will last. King Wen sat on the sandglass, lifting his head to gaze at the noonday sun. According to historical records, the Western Zhou dynasty experienced a stable era lasting 2 centuries. How lucky to be born during such a time. Then how long does a chaotic era last? I already told you. Other than stable eras, all other times belong to chaotic eras. Each of them takes up the time not occupied by the other. So this is a world in which there are no patterns.
So this is just super fun. Like everything about the way this is done is fun.
Yeah.
So you've got these. So I guess like almost everyone in the game is a historical figure. Although I don't recognize the Chinese ones, but eventually there are Western historical figures too. And like their representation in the game is always like an interesting riff on who they are in our history. Like von Neumann invents the computer, etc.
Yeah, there's an Isaac Newton.
But like the fun of it is it's almost like treating the history of science as like a fun mystery that you're trying to solve.
Sure.
And there's like stakes to it. It's like it's not like it's just like, okay, yeah, I guess we need to figure out like how relativity works eventually. It's like we need to figure out physics and cosmology, because for every year we don't figure it out, like we get destroyed and wiped out by these cataclysms.
Yeah.
And so there's this really like sense of stakes to solving the problem, and even though it's a game, first of all, you're not sure what's going on with the game. Like part of me was like, is this actually a game, or is this like, is he like using VR to get in contact with an alien world?
Right.
And it's sort of that, but not really. It's more like a historical record that they're using to teach the humans.
Yeah, you're never quite sure. Are all these people other players, or are they just programs? And the book never really reveals that. It always kind of keeps that close to the chest. Yeah, I mean, I love this concept so much. It's so weird and different. I mean, I love that you pulled the whole dehydration part, because it's so insane. Like, it's just this wonderful idea that I think this author just kind of came up with because he had to explain like how a civilization lives through all these crazy chaotic eras. And he's like, well, what if they've just adapted to be able to put their body in stasis for an extended period of time? And how would that look like? Oh, well, they're just going to suck all the water out of themselves and turn into a candle leather piece of grossness. It's weird. It's off-putting. And you're kind of, I think it really brings you into the world a little bit to where you're like, okay, like there's pyramids, there's all these historical figures, and there's these people dehydrating, and there's this mystery that everyone's trying to solve. And like the first time our main character goes into the game, he's not even like aware enough to be the one that tries to solve the mystery.
Yeah, right. He's just trying to catch up and figure out like what is the mystery? What is the point of this?
Right.
Like why is this game here, and why am I being encouraged to go here? 567 said the surreal quality makes it dreamlike, and I was actually just going to say that like a lot of this reminded me of like Fantastic Planet, where it's just like weird and dreamlike, and but like the dehydrating thing. What I love about it is that at first you're just like, well, that's just really weird and imaginative, and I don't know like where that comes from, but I guess I see the purpose of it. And then later you realize like, oh, they're not humans. They don't look anything like humans. So dehydrating for them makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And so it kind of actually makes sense in a science fiction-y way, but the way it's portrayed here is just so, again, dreamlike.
Yeah. I really liked, I loved it when later in the game we do introduce those more Western scientific characters that we know.
Yeah.
Because like the whole first part, he's like, and the footnotes are trying to help us as much as they can with this. Is like, no, this was a very important, influential mind in Chinese history. This is a very important Chinese scientist. Here's some old leaders of older dynasties. But like, that's still like not intrinsic knowledge we have, like the ones on the Western side are. So like, I feel like introducing those characters a little bit later made me like retroactively like appreciate what he was doing with the characters that I didn't know a little bit better, because I understood. I was like, okay, so it's like I kind of get it now. I get what he's doing with these characters, and I know that probably wasn't intentional, because the people probably reading this are just as aware of Western historical characters as they are their own Eastern ones, and it's because we're stupid, ignorant Americans that don't bother to learn about anyone but our important historical figures.
I just so happened to be listening to a podcast where they were talking about, I think it was Mozi the other day, which I think is spelled Mozi, and I don't think I'm pronouncing it right anyway, but the point is, like, he was basically almost like like the first empiricist of Chinese philosophy, the one who was like, let's go out and actually look at things, which was like an idea that also kind of independently came to Western culture at some point. But the point is, like, I recognized that name, and I was like, oh, and he's saying like the same kinds of things that historical figure would say. That makes sense. So yeah, I caught on to that. I think that's a good. We can move forward to the next slide, because it's a similar concept here. That we move on. Basically, he plays the game over a few different stints, and now we're several cycles of three-body civilization later, where the civilization's been destroyed by chaotic eras and then rebuilt a few times. And at this point, Wang has deduced that the planet of three-body is part of a solar system with 3 suns, and thus solving the game involves solving the famous three-body problem, which the book is named after, which is the problem of predicting the motions of particles which are attracted to each other over time. And the game here illustrates how a computing machine can be built out of people. Kushi Huang nodded. A guard ran over, grabbed the hilt of the Emperor's sword, and stepped backwards. The bronze sword was so long that it was impossible for the Emperor himself to pull it out of the scabbard. The guard knelt and handed the sword to the Emperor. Qin Shi Huang lifted the sword to the sky and shouted, "Computer formation!" 4 giant bronze cauldrons at the corners of the platform came to life simultaneously with roaring flames. A group of soldiers standing on the sloping side of the pyramid facing the phalanx chanted in unison, "Computer formation!" On the ground below, colors in the phalanx began to shift and move. Complicated and detailed circuit patterns appeared and gradually filled the entire formation. 10 minutes later, the army had made a 36-kilometer square computer motherboard. Von Neumann pointed to the gigantic human circuit below the pyramid and began to explain, "Your Imperial Majesty, we have named this computer Qin-1. Look there in the center is the CPU, the core computing component, formed from your 5 best divisions. By referencing this diagram, you can locate the adders, registers, and stack memory. The part about it that looks highly regular is the memory. When we built that part, we found that we didn't have enough soldiers, but luckily the work done by this element by the elements in this component is the simplest, so we trained each soldier to hold more colored flags. Each man can now complete the work that initially required 20 men. This allowed us to increase the memory capacity to meet the minimum requirements for running the Qin 1.0 operating system. Observe also the open passage that runs through the entire formation and the light cavalry waiting for orders in that passage. That's the system bus responsible for transmitting information between the components of the whole system." So yeah, when I opened this book, I did not expect to get a primer on the von Neumann computer architecture using ancient Chinese cavalry and infantry formations.
It's the coolest idea in the book. Like, I mean, in a book of grand ideas and wonderful thoughts and philosophies on life and existence, they built a computer out of 30 million people.
Yeah.
A highly inefficient computer, hilariously inefficient computer. I think the funny thing is they're trying to solve the 3-body problem using the computer, right?
Right.
And they're trying to predict when the next stable error will be. And I think it takes a year to finish the computation. And then it's like, it will be in 2 years. And in my head, I was like, is that 2 years from when you started running the computation?
Yeah.
Or is it 2 years from now? It's such a fun little idea. And then we learned a little bit later that like the only reason this alien race was actually able to do something like this is because they're just like their bodies are different than ours. Like the actual idea of like the flags would not have ever actually worked at an efficient level in reality.
Yeah. Right. I mean, especially because there'd be errors like there was
right.
here
There'd be so many errors.
Yeah.
But it's such a fun idea. Like, I love, like, as someone who's only like basically studied programming, the slow introduction that the book does of like what and or nor like how those kind of binary gates work was just like, yeah, I mean, it's so clever that we're doing this via people.
Yeah, it's downright whimsical.
Yeah.
And I love that he indulges in it and he spends as much time as he wants to spend, like you said, going through all of the gates and not just being like, they assembled a computer out of people and did the calculation. Well, like he could have done this some other way and had it be like simpler.
Yeah.
Like they could have just built it out of mechanical parts or something, but this is so much more fun and almost like a fairy tale. It's really cool.
But I think it also kind of speaks to some of the themes of the story though, because it's this general idea that like every single person comes together to solve a problem collectively.
Yeah.
And they still aren't, right? And that's, I think, why maybe you see the society as one that's given up, because sometimes problems are so complicated that even everyone coming together, it's not sufficient. Not yet, at least.
Yeah. You literally turn your society into a computer where it's a totalitarianism to the point where everyone is just like raising flags in response to signals.
Right. Like yearly, like constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, the cool thing about this is because it's in this game scenario that like the logic of it doesn't have to exist. Like the logic of when do these people eat or sleep or go to the bathroom? Like it doesn't have to exist because it's, as 567 said, it's this like dream-like world. But it's like symbolic of what the society actually ends up doing in the future, which is every single member of the society has one purpose and one purpose only, and it's to help solve this mystery.
Yeah, and they're all on the same page too. I mean, it's interesting because there's also this notion that like the reason why the Trisolarian civilization apparently over countless eons had this structure of like there being one leader who made all the decisions, it's like intrinsic to their species almost, because it's the only way that they can solve problems.
Right.
Because like they live in such a world of chaos that like they absolutely need this kind of coordination and organization.
But
authority.
but it's not solving the problems. I
It's
think
true.
that's one of the greatest things about it is, yes, this is kind of the way they've defaulted, but it's allowed them to survive but not solve their central problem, and thusly they've given up.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if as the series goes on, like the one Trisolaran who takes the initiative to try to send the warning to Earth ends up, you know, being the one who actually caused the good outcome to happen for everyone.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that too.
Yeah.
All right, but let's move on to the next slide because Wang has gone undercover as a new member of the conspiracy of humans intent on helping the alien Trisolarans invade Earth. This section ends with the revelation, wow, of who their leader is, who is a character we've heard about before.
Mm-hmm.
Your environmental branch should be creating environmental disasters and then exploiting them. For example, disseminating poison in reservoirs, leaking toxic waste from chemical plants. Have you done any of these? No, not a single one. We have devised numerous programs and plans, but the commander vetoed them all. Anyway, such acts would have been stupid, at least until recently. The biology and medicine branch once created a catastrophe from the overuse of antibiotics, but that was soon detected, and the rash actions of the European detachment almost drew attention to us. Talk about drawing attention to us, you just murdered someone. Listen to me, comrades. Sooner or later, it would have been unavoidable. You must already know that the governments of the world are preparing for war. In Europe and North America, they're already cracking down on the organization. Once the crackdown begins here, the redemptionists will no doubt side with the government. So our first priority is to purge the redemptionists from the organization. That is not within your authority. Of course, the commander must decide, but, comrades, I can tell you right now that the commander is an Adventist. Now you're just making things up. Everybody knows the scope of the commander's power. If the commander is really an Adventist, then redemptionists would have been purged long ago. Maybe the commander knows something we don't. Perhaps that's what today's meeting is about. After this, the crowd's attention turned away from Pan Han to the crisis before them. A famous scientist who had won the Turing Award jumped onto the table and began to speak. The time for talk is over, comrades. What should be our next step? Start a global rebellion. Then we're asking to be killed. Long live the spirit of Trisolaris. We shall preserve like the stubborn grass that resprouts after every wildfire. Our rebellion will finally reveal our existence to the world. As long as we have an appropriate plan of action, I'm sure many people will support us. The last remark came from Pan Han, and men applauded. Many applauded. Someone yelled, "The commander is here!" The crowd parted to form a path. Wang looked up and felt dizzy. The world turned white and black in his eyes, and the only spot of color was the person who had just appeared. Surrounded by a group of young bodyguards, the commander-in-chief of the Earth Trisolaris rebels, Wang and Shi, walked steadily into the crowd. Dun dun dun!
Yep. So, I mean, it was hard to pull these slides for this book because, like, it's so impossible to figure out how Ye's story weaves into the main plot because they Tarantino it so hard.
They do, yeah.
Sure. I mean, eventually it becomes clear, but it actually becomes clear like after this point, where like, okay, so she basically lives out most of her life as like, an untouchable, basically in this military, basically radio telescope observatory type situation, and she's like doing research, kind of keeping her head down, like still basically traumatized her whole life by what she went through and kind of how she feels about society. And it's all led her to, I don't know. I mean, it's all out of order. That's the interesting thing is you don't know yet why she's doing this really.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the fun of the story too, because like the entirety of this conversation is like talking about what side of this whole thing Ye sides with. And the fun thing is they're talking about the Adventists and the Redemptionists, and we don't actually know what those groups, like we don't know the philosophy of those groups yet. So like we're speaking about a commander we don't know yet, about two sides of dissent within their organization that we don't have a clear idea what they stand for yet. We can kind of get an idea by the tone of what they're talking about here, that like obviously the Adventists are much more interested in destruction than the redemptionists are. I mean, you can kind of
Right.
tell that by just context of the words used for their different sides.
Right.
But we still don't really have a good grasp on all this stuff yet. And I think it helps. I do think it helps, like, you know, guide you through the story, because I think if this was not Tarantino'd, I think it would be less interesting. I think part of what propels you through this story is that central mystery. Is like, okay, we saw part of it. We know the Trisolaris is an alien race. There's an organization here supporting them, but what does that mean? What is their goal? What are they doing? Why? Like, that stuff is still up to the mystery.
Yeah, right. It's very satisfying. I'm not actually complaining about the way the book works. I was complaining about the difficulty of making the slides make sense.
Yeah, no, I got you.
But like another thing about this pair of slides is, like, do you read it as being like absurdist almost to the point of being dark comedy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's how I read it. And this is one of the times where I'm the least certain that it's supposed to come off that way, and that I'm not just like, if you read this in, you know, from a Chinese cultural perspective, this is just like how they're going to talk in this situation. But like, to me, it's meant to reflect kind of the just unhinged sloganeering and sides taking that was happening in the second slide of the story, where they're all about, like, they're yelling, they're more concerned about like minute differences in ideology than they are about like winning.
Yeah, I think that connection is absolutely intentional, in my opinion. Yeah. I remember reading the opening parts of the book, and, you know, the elder Ye is arguing back with them, and they're just kind of nuts. Like, even just the idea, like, just the image that paints is supposed to be absurdist. We didn't really focus on this when we read the slide, but these are, you know, young 14-year-old children attacking an elderly doctor with belt buckles, like that, right. and just like that. It's horrifying. Yes, I don't want to diminish the horrifying nature of it, but it's horrifying in a very specific type of image, like a very absurdist type of image. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right that leads, that we're supposed to be connecting the dots here, because like have you poisoned the reservoir yet? No, you have not poisoned the reservoir. Like, you haven't done any of this stuff. Like this, a link to our fear over the overuse of antibiotics, like, which is a real world fear being just a plot of this group. And like, talk about drawing attention to us. You just murdered someone. It's like, we must not be rash in our actions, but you just shot someone. It's kind of like watching a bunch of evil henchmen, like, argue amongst themselves about like what is the level of badness they should be doing. And it is. I think you're absolutely right that it's supposed to be like darkly comic here.
Yes, thank you for validating my profound humor that I found in this because, like, it could. I thought it was really fascinating reading it from this, like, position of cultural uncertainty, where I'm like, this is either really funny or really sad. I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm going to take it as hilarious in a darkly comic way, of course.
I think it could be both. I mean, look at this line right here. A famous scientist who had won the Turing Award jumped up onto a table and began to speak. The time for talk is over. Like, that's exactly. Inherently absurd.
Yes, that's inherently, and just these people starting, like, just shouting things like "Start a global revolution." Yeah. It's like, okay, that's.
And I love, crazy. I mean, and the text really emphasizes that, but just like, it could have just been a scientist jumped on a table, or a guy jumped on a table and started shouting, but a famous scientist who had won the Turing Award. Like, this is supposed to be like one of the most brilliant minds of humanity is reduced to jumping on a table and saying, no more talking, we must do so. Yeah, I think 567 in the chat says a major theme of the story is how ideology can propel people to extremism and abandon logic. And yeah, that is this to a T. And it is supposed to be alarmingly funny, I think.
Yeah. Cool.
But of course, it's Ye. She's responsible for all of this.
She's and you know, it was a very brief scene, but there's the moment when Wang actually, you know, she's the mother of the young scientist who Wang kind of like fell in love with from afar, and so she's driven her own daughter to suicide.
Yeah.
And then, like, it gets worse than that. Like, it's terrible. Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't remember if you pulled a slide on this before, but like her interrogations later in the book are very fascinating, because they're so like emotionally detached. Like she doesn't feel like she is responsible for all of this, but is like, I just started it. I can't control these guys. It's like, you killed your daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. I think she's just broken at this point.
Yeah.
All right. So next slide, we're wrapping up the three-body game. And Wang learns that the Trisolarans have given up on actually solving the three-body problem. So he comes in with these like pieces of paper that have an actual solution to the three-body problem. You seem to be suggesting that someone has already created such a mathematical model? Yes, there are dozens of other mathematical models. Of those, more than half are more advanced than yours. They've all been implemented and run on computers. During the past 2 centuries, such massive computation became the principal activity of this world. Everyone waited for the results, as if waiting for Judgment Day. And we have definitely proven that the three-body problem has no solution. Wang gazed up at the massive pendulum overhead. In the dawn light, it was crystal bright. Its deformed mirror-like surface reflected everything around it like the eye of the world. In this place, in a distant age separated from here and now by many civilizations, he and King Wen had passed through a forest of giant pendulums on their way to the palace of King Zhu. Just like that, history had made a long circuit and returned to its starting place. The science advisor said, "It's just like we guessed long ago. The three-body system is a chaotic system. Tiny perturbations can be endlessly amplified. Its patterns of movement essentially cannot be mathematically predicted." Wang felt his scientific knowledge and system of thought become a blur in a single moment. In their place was unprecedented confusion. If even an extremely simple arrangement like the three-body system is unpredictable chaos, how can we have any faith in discovering the laws of the complicated universe? "God is a shameless old gambler. He has abandoned us." The speaker was Einstein, waving his violin. Wang didn't know when he had shown up. There's that comedy again.
Einstein, it's perfect, it being Einstein.
Yeah,
It's perfect.
And this was that quote that I kind of gestured at earlier.
Yeah.
This idea where even an extremely simple system like the three-body system, which really is like the simplest you can get that isn't just like 2 points orbiting each other, cannot be solved. How can we solve any of our actually complicated world problems? It's such a cool. This reminds me a lot of Blindside, where it's like the whole book is almost leading up to this moment. I don't know if it hits quite as hard as Blindside does, but you're like, interesting.
Yeah. But isn't that, I feel like it's simple in the basic of it, right? Like it's not, the whole point of it is it's not simple, right? Like it's simple in that, okay, it's only 3 things orbiting around each other. But like the reason why the solution is so difficult is because it's actually like super, super complicated and relies on like everything we know about how physics work and computational calculus. Like,
yeah,
I just feel like simplifying it and just saying it's just 3 bodies that are just like, why can't we do this?
I think you're right, because the thing is, like, truly chaotic systems are like, there's always some forcing function operating on things, right? Like I if I pulled a plug out of the side of a barrel, I can predict how long it's going to take to drain. Like that, like even though the motion of each of the individual particles inside the barrel is chaotic,
right.
I can predict how long it takes to drain to within like a fraction of a second, right? And that the same goes for most things we care about. Actually, it just so happens that the Trisolarans are subject to this chaotic system, but I think everything does have an element of chaos in it, but that doesn't make it completely unpredictable. That doesn't make it solvable.
Mm-hmm.
So
why can't we? I'm not a scientist. Why can't we solve this?
Well, the answer is that even the tiniest error in measuring, like let's say you want to predict the positions of the balls in a year or whatever, or the suns, even the tiniest measurement error is going to just amplify with each like calculation time step until a certain point when you're just going to look at your answer and compare it to reality, and it's just going to be completely wrong. And you can't
not make any errors.
Well, but it's. That's
it.
Yeah, you're right. Good job. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's its simplicity is actually kind of a lie, because it's like, yeah, it's unrealistically simple. It's a if it weren't so simple, it would actually probably have an easier solution, because the solution would be like, the gas clouds around the sun cause them to slow down and they crash into each other, and then they just form one star.
Mm-hmm.
There, that was easy. But anyway.
Right, but yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, it's like we know how to calculate every single little bit of interaction between them all. It's just a matter of extrapolating that out infinitely into the future.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
impossible.
that's another thing, is you're like, I don't like why do they need to extrapolate it out more than, a couple of years, and then after a couple of years take more measurements and extrapolate it out a couple more years? Like, do they really need to know when the chaotic eras are coming? I guess that's all moot, because what actually happens is, like, they get that, like, triple the triple star effect, or whatever it's called, where their planet literally gets ripped in half,
Yeah.
and it takes them like 9 million years to recover.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, their choice to flee their solar system has more to do with the fact that they're like, look, we're all going to die if we stay here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like, it gets to a point where solving the problem doesn't matter anymore, which is what I found so interesting about the redemptionists, as people that like are like, if we solve the 3-body problem for them, they won't come here anymore. And it's like, well, like, being able to predict when their planet's going to be destroyed is not going to stop their planet from being destroyed.
Yeah, true. This kind of thing makes me want to read the next books, because I'm interested to see where he takes all these ideas.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see, like, what the genius plan to stop them is. Because maybe you're going to talk about this later, but I love this idea that, like, the reason why they send these protons to our planet to halt our science is because we're making scientific leaps and bounds. And like, that is in such basic contradiction to everything that Ye believes, right? Like, Ye's whole thing is, there's no way we're going to be able to solve any of our problems ever. We need an outside source to do it. And then the outside source is like, hey, they're going to, like, their technology, it's crazy. Like, they're so much better at all this stuff than us. By the time we get there, they'll be, like, super more advanced than we are. People who found a way to unfold a proton into 2-dimensional space and attach a giant computer to it that is omniscient and can do everything. And, like, it's like, huh, I feel like we're gonna be pretty good humans. We're gonna be okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost part of the farce, is this idea that, like, you can make a super intelligent proton, but you're going to use it to hamstring the scientific development of a civilization.
Yeah.
That otherwise could have solved their own problems, and maybe like solved everyone's problems.
Yeah, I feel like if you have the ability to unfold ninth dimensional space into a second dimension, maybe you can just, like, build yourself a planet somewhere.
Yeah, right. Everyone just hop onto the proton and then fold it up again.
God, Trisolarans, you're pulling the real Thanos here. Just make more food, Thanos.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
I haven't seen the new movie yet. Sorry.
Yeah. You also kind of buy that the Trisolarans would have, like, a bit of a tunnel vision problem. Like,
sure, absolutely. I mean, they gave up and then decided that the only solution to their problem was going to be, we're going to, set up all these message receiving stations and just wait for someone to come along that we can ruthlessly conquer and take over, because our way is the better way, and therefore we deserve to exist more than they do.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. We've now jumped back to the past, and Ye is attempting to use the sun as a signal amplifier to send a message out to the cosmos, and she's successful, and she receives a message from space, but not the one she expected. Do not answer. Do not answer. Do not answer. This world has received your message. I am a pacifist in this world. It is the luck of your civilization that I am the first one to receive your message. I am warning you. Do not answer. Do not answer. Do not answer. There are tens of millions of stars in your direction. As long as you do not answer, this world will not be able to ascertain the source of your transmission. But if you do answer, the source will be located right away. Your planet will be invaded. Your world will be conquered. Do not answer. Do not answer. Do not answer. Maintaining her composure, she worked quickly and moved all of the receiving messages to a multiply encrypted invisible subdirectory. Then she copied over a segment of noise received a year ago as a substitute for the transmission received during the last 5 hours. Finally, from the terminal, she placed a short message into the Red Coast transmission buffer. The sun was now completely above the horizon. The crosshair of the Red Coast positioning system was aimed at its upper edge to account for the time it would take for the radio wave to travel to the sun. The transmission system was ready. The transmit button was a long rectangle, very similar to the space key on a computer keyboard, except that it was red. The fate of the entire human race now tied to these slender fingers. Without hesitation, Ye pressed the button. The message that was winging its way to the sun said, "Come here. I will help you conquer this world. Our civilization is no longer capable of solving its own problems. We need your force to intervene." Then Ye finds out she's pregnant.
Yep. It's all so tragic, and that's another thing. Like, he didn't have to give her the situation where she has the potential to have like a good, normal, desirable life and throws it away on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But it just gets worse and worse.
I love this whole thing. I love how quickly she acts. I love that it reinforces she acts without hesitation.
Yeah.
I really love how this whole scene is reflected when we go over to Trisolaris and we see this person that's sending her the warning message, and we see how similar they are. Like the text here, the words are identical.
Yeah. And the person is like, we have our own problems. We're definitely in no shape to be having first contact right now. We need to yeah, I mean, and of course, we've mentioned this a few times now, but this is kind of the culmination of this idea that people give up on solving their problems and decide that they'd rather burn it all down or just hand it off to someone else, and how this mentality just kind of perpetuates itself in an endless cycle. Because the reason why Ye is like this is because people did this basic thing to her when she was a kid, and now she's sending it on to the next cycle because she finds out she's pregnant immediately.
Yeah. And the fascinating thing about this to me, so the Trisolarans' problem that they're trying to solve and they can't solve and they've given up is we are in an inherently complex system that is eventually going to decay and destroy itself. Now, our system is not like that. Or is it? I mean, is that what the book says? Like, because if you take this metaphor, this alien race, and supplant it to humanity, she believes we can't solve our problems. Well, what are our problems? Well, there's hunger, there's violence, there's death, there's ideological powers that come over and sweep and murder and kill people. Those are our problems. We need help solving those problems. But those are problems like that we create in the attempts to solve those problems. Because that's literally what's happening here. In an effort to solve the problem of this cyclical ideological, crises, we're creating more of them. And I think that's fascinating to me, because it's almost just like, just live, like, just be like the cop.
Yeah, just keep your head down. Yeah, I mean, I love what you said earlier about this idea that like the communist revolution was a chaotic era, and we intermittently pass through these chaotic eras, and then in the present of the story, we're in a stable era, and we've been enjoying the fruits of a stable era for some years.
Yeah.
And like it's only the elderly like Ye who can actually appreciate that like this isn't what the world is actually like. It's actually subject to these repeating chaotic eras, and it's pointless to strive like this. Which I don't think that's accurate, but
I mean, the idea that we are one day going to just be able to solve all of humanity's problems is, I think, as ridiculous as the idea that there is a singular solution to a three-body problem. Right. It is existence, life. Humanity is too complex, too crazy. There's too much.
But it's like I'll ponder those problems for as many centuries as it takes, as my lifespan becomes longer and longer, because we solve more and more of the actually bad problems and leave this kind of annoying problems.
Yeah. but that's life, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's life is
Solving problems.
humanity trying to solve problems,
Right. And it would actually be
and
boring if there were no
survive.
problems, right?
Right.
Yeah. We
And
can
so,
we can do away with the pointless, unendurable suffering, and then we can just keep the building sophons out of
Right.
out of protons.
so the idea that someone would sit back and be like, well, we didn't solve all our problems.
Yeah.
I guess we should just die now. It's just like
Right.
inherently contradictory to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was so messed up because like when he meets Ye, she's like living happily with these small children and like taking care of the children.
Right.
And it's like she has put into motion the destruction of the whole world. I really don't know what's up with this woman. She's so crazy, and like she's such a upsetting villain. She's like a more upsetting villain than a lot of villains who are apparently worse because of the like hollowness that must be inside her if she's able to do these things,
Right.
and live this way.
Yeah. 567 points out something cool, that the word for chaotic in Chinese also has an inherent connotation of conflict, which fits with the Taoist ideology of a cyclical nature of society transitioning between harmony and conflict. Which is great, because something we didn't point out is that the first solution to the three-body problem was like a map on a yin and a yang, right? This kind of this harmony between these two sides going back and forth. Obviously that didn't work, but yeah, I like that. I like that idea a lot. Like that. It's just like, and I think the thing about it is, like, there's no. I just love this idea that look, there's no predicting when life's gonna get crazy. Like there's just no like it like the three-body problem. Life is inherently chaotic. There's no predicting when it's gonna get crazy. All you can do is do your best to survive when those chaotic systems come.
Yeah, right. Just dehydrate and go into the big cylinders, man. Don't worry about it. Just
metaphorically dehydrate.
Yeah, and then rehydrate and grow some crops and let the three suns shine on your face. It's deep. It's deep. All right. Next slide. When the message from Trisolaris is discovered back in the past, Ye decides that she'll need to take care of her boss, Lei. He put on the safety harness and went over the edge of the cliff edge on the rope, as though I didn't exist. I made some excuse to get rid of the soldier who brought him, so that I was the only one left on the cliff. Then I took a short hacksaw out of my pocket. It was made from a longer saw blade broken into 3 pieces and then stacked together. With the stacked blades, any cut I made would be particularly ragged, and it would not be obvious later that the rope was cut through with the tool. Just then, my husband, Yang Wenying, showed up. After I explained to him what had happened, he looked over the cliff edge. Then he said that to inspect the ground terminal in the cliff face required digging, and the work would be too much for just Lei. He wanted to go down to help, so he put on the safety harness left by that other soldier. I asked him to use the other rope, but he said no. The rope that Lei was on was thick and sturdy and could easily bear the weight of 2. I insisted, so he told me to go get the rope. By the time I rushed back to the cliff with that rope, he was already down and over the side. I poked my head over the edge and saw that he and Lei had already finished their inspection and were climbing back up. Lei was in the front. There would never be another chance. I took out my hacksaw and cut through the rope.
Cold-blooded.
Very devoted.
Husband.
Her husband, who, like, by all accounts, she, like, basically loved. I guess it's kind of complicated since she was in kind of a weird situation, but like he was always kind to her, and she liked him a lot and genuinely appreciated him. Like, it wasn't there's no real hint in the text that she felt like it was a sham, you know?
No, I mean, it wasn't a loving marriage either. Like, traditionally.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like they had a whirlwind romance, but like it was definitely a better, like she was living a better life than she ever like thought she would get, being a political pariah. But I guess that, you know, that didn't resolve basically the trauma that was inside her.
Yeah, but I do love the yin and the yang of this, right? Because what started her on this path was that the person she loved was ruthlessly killed, just because, you know, just for almost a nonsensical reason. And now the person that loves her, she just ruthlessly kills for no reason at all.
Yeah. Yep. It sucks. And she basically becomes the kind of monster that made her in the first place.
Yep.
I kind of wanted to pull slides on when she has the meeting with the Red Guard women who killed her father, but I couldn't really squeeze it down into a small amount of text. But
yeah, that's a fascinating scene, though.
yeah, that was really interesting because it's like she wants some kind of justice, some kind of like acknowledgement about what they've done, and like and they were all just like, what do you want from us? We're just as much victims as you are. and in a sense, like, she's kind of just as, like, even though she's doing this and perpetuating the cycle, she's just as much victims. Like it's this endless cycle where like everyone in the cycle is a victim of what came before in the cycle.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, and that's fascinating, and I think it all comes back to this. Especially, I mean, this is a very scientific book, and it comes back to this kind of scientific drive to solve things, right? Like she wants to go to these people and understand them, because she wants to solve she wants to solve why this happened, right? Like this is like why her father was murdered in front of her eyes is her own three-body problem that she wants to solve. And everyone has these three-body problems when they're trying to understand, why something happens. I mean, look at this. There are three people here. She's using a hacksaw that is taken from a long saw blade, broken into three pieces and stacked on each other. Like there's rules of three all over this book. And it's just like, why is this happening? Like, how could we predict a model for this? And it's like, no, because this is inherently chaotic. It's inherently ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason to what she's doing here other than, her gravital force says, I want to win here, ergo destroy these things.
Yeah, right. I can't suffer the world to continue existing as it is, and therefore perpetuates the world existing as it is.
Right.
So you kind of reminded me of this, and it's sort of apropos of nothing, but I thought that it might be funny to people, the fact that like it's a joke in academia to, like, if you have two spouses in academia who are both like trying to be professors or in academia in some capacity, they call it the two-body problem because it's very difficult to like find reasonable jobs for both spouses at the same university. And so the joke really is it's the two-body problem. Yeah,
that's really great. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
All right, so now we move to the latter part of the book, and we abruptly jump point of view. Basically, they do this complicated mission where they slice a boat into pieces and get recording. So we get all the recordings from Trisolaris, and based on these recordings and these communications, a narrative is built about what happens on Trisolaris, and the book is replaying that to us. We need a decisive act that will completely suffocate science on Earth and freeze at its current level. Let's focus on the key here. Overall technological development depends on the advancement of basic science, and the foundation of basic science lies in the exploration of the deep structure of matter. If there's no progress in this field, there can be no major breakthrough in science and technology as a whole. Now everyone, look up. What's that? The princeps pointed at the sky. The consuls lifted their heads to gaze in that direction. They saw a ring in space giving off a metallic glow in the sunlight. Is that the dock for building the second space fleet? No. That's the large particle accelerator still under construction. The plans for building the second space fleet have been scrapped. All resources are now devoted to Project Sophon. Project Sophon? Yes, we've kept this plan a secret from most of you present. I now ask the science consul to give an introduction. I know about this plan, but didn't know it had progressed this far. The speaker was the industry consul. The culture and education consul said, I knew about this plan as well, but thought it was a fairy tale. The science consul said, Project Sophon, to put it simply, aims to transform a proton into a super-intelligent computer. And there's a wonderful footnote here that says there's a pun in Chinese between the word for proton, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, and the word for Sophon, which is, that's clever and wonderful.
Which I typed out there almost to amuse myself because they're the same word in English, but I'm sure, but they're written in different characters.
Yeah.
The whole part on Trisolaris is crazy. it's so weird that this comes at the end of the book, you know?
The interesting part to me, and I think 567 is saying something to this effect right now in chat, that like it feels weird. It's almost written in a different tone. Like
Yeah.
it is closer to Three Body than I thought it was going to be. Right? Like it's this is the real place now. This is the real people, but it's kind of absurd in very specific ways. Like the next slide goes over this, but like the unfolding of the proton, like the slow raining down of like the one-dimensional one-dimensional space, like the three-dimensional space, like being a living being that like attacks them.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's almost as dreamy and ridiculous as Three Body is.
I mean, I kind of like it. Like, I just think it's nuts. Like, the whole book is nuts, and this is kind of the capstone to it.
Yeah.
It's like, now we're just going to spend several chapters on an alien world where, and like it says they're talking, but like it's also been clear that they probably look like Mylar balloons that are flashing light at each other.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's just completely insane to imagine like what these scenes are supposed to actually look like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to read the next slide because it's the last slide,
Sure.
and I basically pulled it out just because I think it's awesome. As we move to higher dimensions, the complexity and number of structures within a particle increase dramatically. The comparisons I'm about to make will not be precise, but should give you an idea of the scale. A particle seen from a 7-dimensional perspective has a complexity comparable to our trisolarian stellar system in 3 dimensions. From an 8-dimensional perspective, a particle is a vast presence like the Milky Way. When the perspective has been raised to 9 dimensions, a fundamental particle's internal structure and complexity are equal to the whole universe. As for even higher dimensions, our physicists physicists haven't been able to explore them, so we cannot yet imagine the degree of complexity. The princeps pointed to the giant eyes in space. Do these show that the microcosmos contained within the unfolded proton harbors intelligent life? Our definition of life is probably not appropriate for the high-dimensional microcosmos. More accurately, we can only say that the universe contains intelligence or wisdom. Scientists have long predicted this possibility. It would have been odd for such a complex and vast world to not have evolved something akin to intelligence. Why have they transformed into eyes to look at us? The princeps looked up at the eyes in space, beautiful lifelike sculptures, all of them gazing upon the planet below strangely. Maybe they just want to demonstrate their presence. Can they fall down here? Not at all. You may rest easy, princeps. Even if they were to fall, the mass of all these huge structures added together is only that of a proton, just like the one-dimensional string from last time. They won't have any effect on our world. People just have to get used to the strange sight. But this time, the science council was wrong.
They make a giant lens and start to cook the city.
Yeah, it's so like this. The book just starts throwing insane ideas in toward the end, where they're just like, what if protons have universes in them, and the universes have like creepy eyes in them, and then they are aggressive.
And I guess if I had to complain about this, it's that I feel like the book like loses itself a little bit in this. I feel like the author just like loved going down this hypothetical like rabbit hole that he just kind of lost the plot a little bit. And I'm not saying I don't find it fascinating. I do. It's interesting theoretical stuff that is mostly just nonsense to me. Like I don't even understand theoretically how any of this would actually work. But it's just like it's nothing really. Like I struggle to relate this to the central metaphor that Trisolaris presents in this book. Of kind of this communist society that has completely stopped, like has given up and has just decided, no, we need to destroy the other.
Yeah, I guess I agree. I mean, I feel like this is all part and parcel with like building the computer out of people, where it's just like he's just gonna take you down this tangent. Yeah. And I mean, I guess the computer made out of people had more thematic resonance than this, but I mean, you could also say that like there's a certain sense of the fractal here, where like if a proton contains a microcosmos, and these people are willing to destroy a universe basically to pursue their goals, like, and they don't really bat an eye at it. That's the
Yeah.
kind of decision that keeps getting made over and over in these stories.
Yeah, I mean, I did like the comparison between like, we'll let everyone know that there's this entire microcosmos inside each one of these protons, and every time we smash them together, we end an entire universe of existence, because that'll soften the blow when we do it to those humans on that planet.
Yeah.
Like, I think I liked the extension of that, like that inherent justification for terrible acts,
Right.
through that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's the moment of cosmic horror where it's like, and even if we weren't doing that, cosmic rays are doing it all the time.
Right. Yeah. I did like on the first slide here, like they see this ring in space, this wonderful ring, and it's like, oh, is that the second fleet? Like, putting all our resources into existence? They're like, nah, we scrapped the idea of a second fleet. We're gonna put all our resources toward fucking up these people specifically. We're not gonna actually solve any of our problems. We're not gonna do any contingency plan. We're not gonna have any kind of fleet to carry us anywhere. All resources now will be towards just screwing up our enemy, like totally focused on the enemy. And that is such a thing we do constantly.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a human trait. Like, it's like, oh, let's just oh, there's something we want over there. There's a threat to us. Forget all other advancement. All advancement goes towards specifically weapon to kill the other.
Yeah, it almost adds insult to injury by the weapon being like 2 protons, where it's like all they're gonna do is just mess everything up. Like, they're not even a weapon in the classic sense. They're just pure sabotage and meant to just waste time and energy. And it's just so frustrating. It's so much more frustrating than it would be if they were like firing a missile at us. Because like, oh, a missile, okay, yeah, we can
deal with that kind of problem.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, like, just like, hey, you can never do any super collider tests ever again because you will never get an accurate reading. Sorry.
Yeah, right. And people are going to get like countdowns in their vision if they, or worse probably, Well, we don't know. We don't really know what it's capable of if it
everything.
Yeah, right.
It's capable of being annihilated and then reforming within nanoseconds.
Yeah.
And then so the book ends basically with the alien race declaring themselves. They go public finally and tell every single human being on the planet, "You're bugs."
Yeah.
But then our band of humans realize that, hey, we can't get rid of bugs.
Yeah.
We've tried really hard and we can't get rid of them. So maybe they're going to have more of a difficulty with this than we think they are. And that's kind of where the book leaves us off. And it's our boy, what's his name again? The cop.
Sure.
Dasha.
Yeah.
Who solves the bug problem by showing them a bunch of locusts.
Yeah, gives everyone hope by comparing us to locusts.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I love the dreamlike quality. I think that it actually, it's able to cover over a lot of sins with having this kind of dreamlike, like sometimes farcical, sometimes absurdist, sometimes fantastical tone. Because like I sympathize with the idea that like the latter parts of the book and even some of the middle parts just go off the rails in a way where you're like, what is this book?
Yeah.
But I find it charming. I have decided that it's charming.
I mean, I don't disagree. I just like with Foundation, like I wonder, isn't there a way to tell this story where you also make characters? Like I feel like the it's like this false choice between like, oh, we either like dive really deep and nerdy into these big ideas, or we create real 3-dimensional characters. And we can't possibly do both of those things. We have to choose one or the other. And I guess like I just don't think that's true. And while I enjoyed this book and I appreciate a lot of the ideas that this book presented and the ways in which they presented them, I just want to be like, couldn't you have like made Wang like a person also?
Yeah, Wang and like, yay! I really do just see her as like an evil monster who. Yeah. Like, yeah, a bad thing happened to her, but I really don't have any sympathy for her by the end of the story. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's intentional, but then again, maybe the author wanted me to have sympathy for her and to be more in her shoes and like see how she could have made the choices that she makes. Because as it stands, I don't. Like, I'm just like, no, that's too far away from from the kinds of choices that I would ever make. And yeah, you can get me into that headspace if you kind of use the art of writing to use empathy to seduce me into it. But
Yeah.
that's not what he did.
Well, I mean, what it leaves me with is this reaction to this book that is very like cold and high level. Just like yes, this was a very amusing story with very interesting ideas that I've enjoyed talking to my friend about. But I don't care on an emotional level about any of this, right? Like, and so when I'm sitting here saying like, okay, do I want to read the next two books in the series? Part of me is like, yeah, because I kind of want to see what happens. But the other part of me is like, yeah, but am I gonna care am I gonna care about what happens? You know?
Yeah. I'm avoiding spoiling the next books. I've read just like the dust jacket cover on those, but I think that the odds that you won't care what happens are roughly the same as the odds that you didn't care what happens in this book.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do want to read the next ones because I just purely enjoyed this as an experience, and like I'm as into characters as you are. Like I always prefer a book like Blindsight where each of the characters is this, little Rubik's cube of complexity and also reflects the themes in their own ways.
That's a great example. Blindsight is a perfect example of a book that manages to pull off both.
Yeah.
It talks about these grand, complicated, very science-based ideas, but still manages to create characters that I cared about.
Yeah. That's why I love that one so much.
Yeah.
Dave. So yeah, well, I guess we're gonna move on into just the freeform discussion and Q&A for a little bit.
Yeah.
David's asking what was our favorite funny moment reading this book. It's almost certainly something involving the fictional personalities in Three Body.
Yeah.
Although it might have been something involving Shi doing something, typical and harassing Wang, basically.
I think the human computer was probably one of the funniest moments to me. I think when they first booted up the human computer and there was an error right away, and they're like, "Oh shit!" and their response to the error was just execute all those people because they did it wrong. Which I mean, like, if you translate computer to if you human computer to real computer, if a piece is shorting out, you just replace it and throw it away, right? So it makes logical sense, but it's just like, just kill all those people.
Yeah, and everyone else will work harder and not make mistakes. Yeah.
Yes. That was my yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm torn, right? Like I gave this book 3 stars on Goodreads. I haven't decided what that means. I honestly searched what I gave Foundation and said, let's just do that again.
Do that again. I think I like this more than Foundation. I mean, I enjoyed it more than Foundation. That's for sure. It just
I don't know.
I've over recent months I've figured out that just like the best way to know how I feel about something is just to say like, am I looking forward to getting back to it? Mm-hmm. Like when am I looking forward to my commute home so I can listen to the audiobook more?
Yeah.
Or am I staying up later listening to it than I otherwise would? Then yeah, and like this book passes those tests pretty well for me because I was always looking forward to figuring out more of what was happening. The mystery, especially the mystery element, worked really well for me.
Yeah.
Really hooked me onto it.
And my experience with it was, when I was reading it, I would get sucked into certain parts. Like if I would get to a 3 Body chapter, I would read that and be sucked into it, and then I would usually put it down after that, and then have to talk myself into picking it up again. But I would normally enjoy it when I did. It was just I had a lot more trouble getting back to it.
Sure.
Even just within the story itself. So going back to this world again now that we're done, I don't know. Maybe it's low priority. I got a lot of other books to read. It's pretty low priority.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions, folks? 567 says the mystery element really drove them through the book. I agree. I mean, I'm going to bring up Blindsight again just because that's sort of the same idea where it's like you're driving toward understanding what's going on. That's, it's it's a great way of framing a science fiction story because it engages you. It's not just like, here is the world. It's like, let's let's solve this interesting scientific problem along with the characters,
Mhm.
and that's fun.
Yeah, I agree. Would have been more fun if I cared about those characters. All right, Matt. Let's announce next month's book.
Let's do it.
Are you ready? Matt, what book won the vote for next month?
The book was Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson.
Have you ever read any of Mr. Sanderson's books?
I read the last Wheel of Time books, which he wrote, but they were not
Counts.
they were not really his story, but he did write them, so it kind of counts. It's not his story, so it's sort of contaminated by all my really complex feelings about the Wheel of Time.
It's very fair. I I have not read a single Brandon Sanderson book, which is like a big hole in my... I feel like I'm ashamed as a guy who spends a lot of time on the internet talking about stories and storytelling that I've not read anything by Sanderson. So I'm excited about this because I think Mistborn, from everything I've heard, is a really great way to get into Sanderson. So I'm looking forward to this a lot. I can't wait to read it. I got it right here already because I bought it for myself a month ago. And just planning on reading it on my own, and then we saw that someone suggested it in our vote, so I picked it to be up for vote, and it dominated the vote. And now we're here.
I'm
excited. So we did get a question from 567 after we switched over. How freaked out would you be by the Vision countdown, Matt? How freaked out would you be?
I would just assume that I had lost my mind.
Yeah. I probably would not run any scientific experiments. I would just be crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Gonna go to the institution now. All right.
David is very excited for Mistborn. That's good to hear.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So yeah, our discussion on Mistborn will take place on Friday, May 31st at 9:30 p.m. So the last Friday in May. This is one of those wacky 5 Friday months, Matt. So there's actually It's going to be 5 weeks till we're covering this book instead of the normal 4. But that's okay because this book's a little longer than a normal one. So plenty of time to read the book. If you have any questions about it, comments, complaints about anything we talked about this week or about next month's book, like if you guys send us, we don't have this really ever happen, but if you guys send us questions or things you want us to discuss, we can kind of tailor the discussion around some of your comments in advance to help kind of like narrow down what we want to talk about. So it's not just us deciding what we talk about. You guys have control of it too. So you can send those questions out to doofmedia@gmail.com or at our Twitter account @doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia, and consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford, and you'll get access to our private Discord server, as well as the ability to vote for which books we cover in these discussions, and tons of other cool benefits, so go check that out.
Yeah, so if you're mad about Brandon Sanderson winning the vote, you can do something about it.
Yeah, go join that Discord and yell at us in person.
Or just, be able to vote in the poll.
That too.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for coming. If you guys are listening to this via the after the fact recording on our podcast or just on the website, we encourage you guys to try to hang out live with us next month. We know that the Avengers came out this weekend, and most of you people are probably seeing that on Friday night instead of sitting in front of your computer listening to two guys talk about books. But next month, there's a no end game. It's just us. We're the end game. So come hang out with us live next month. And for those of you that did hang out, thanks so much. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for your question. 567, David, Daniel, Mary. Y'all were great. We really enjoyed having y'all here. And we'll see you all next month. I agree, 567. Although I haven't seen the movie yet. I could go see it. I'm seeing it tomorrow morning, and I could come back and say, actually, Avengers is better than us.
Impossible.
10 a.m. Right. Seeing it at 10 a.m. It's going to be good.
I'll probably see it Sunday. My voice is not doing too well, guys, so I don't think I'm going to stick around much longer.
Yeah, it's pretty late. It's been a long week for us. We had a very, very, very busy week this week.
Yes, we did. It was like a 6 podcast week.
Yeah, something like that. Thanks, 567. I think Matt did a much better job with that than I did. But he cheated because he listened to the audiobook. So
That's right. That's right.
All right, guys. Yeah, we're gonna shut it down for today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. We really do appreciate it. I know we said that already, but I'm gonna say it again because I think it makes the show better when you guys are active and chatting with us.
Well, yeah. I mean, you guys today certainly threw in a bunch of questions and comments that I think really improved the discussion. So
yeah, I loved the insights on some Chinese culture that I just don't have access to, or I do have access to. There's no excuse. I just haven't spent the time to learn. Yeah.
Cool.
I do want to read more Chinese fiction though. Maybe not jump into the sequels to this book right away, but if you guys have any just general recommendations of Chinese fiction that you would like us to read or just think I should read, email us.
Yeah. Especially science fiction, because that's all I care about.
Yeah, that's all Matt likes. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you around. Have a good weekend. If you haven't seen Endgame yet, enjoy it. If you have, I hate you.
Yes, I agree.
Bye.
Bye.